On December 19th, 2024. And this is the meeting of the Mashpee Sewer Commission being held at Mashpee Town Hall Walkpoint Meeting Room at 16 Great Neck Road North, Mashpee. And we are being broadcast live on Channel 8 and High Definition Channel 1072. So may I have us all stand to do the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And now we'll observe a moment of silence. Thank you. So now I'd like to have us approach the approval of the minutes. Have you all had chance to review the minutes from the December 5th meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes of the December 5th.
I'll second.
Of the Mashpee Sewer Commission, yes.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Sprout.
Second.
And Commissioner Toole. Thank you for the second. So our meeting minutes for December 5th have now been approved. And we will now be moving into, so I don't know if I need to adjourn the meeting as we move into our public hearing. But we are to be, okay, we don't adjourn the meeting. So we will be holding now a public hearing for pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40A, Section 11, for the Mashpee Sewer Commission to begin our public hearing and to discuss and set the sewer user rates and fees. Okay, I will leave it open now for discussion and to have the, not for discussion, but we'll entertain a presentation by the wastewater superintendent. And for people who may be questioning why we are doing this, it's also part of Massachusetts general law to set fees for the use of the sewers and the sewer drains within a town. And so this is Part 1, Title 14, Chapter 83, Section 16 for Massachusetts general laws, use of sewers as we move forward. Mr. Meter.
Thank you. So after our last meeting where I presented how the system works, what I put together, and I have available for anybody in the audience up here in the front, a copy of this, and I gave each commissioner one. It's the form with the green line on it. I believe, Catherine, did you get yours by email? You can just shake your head since it's okay, perfect. So it's a breakdown of what I'm recommending as a starting point for us to move forward. As we identified in the last meeting, the average sewer rate on Cape Cod is $961.24 annually. This scale that I put together is a little below that average rate. So what I have is in the first tier, and there is a typo under the first tier where it says 1 to 15,000, it should read 0. Because once you're connected to the system, you're going to pay this base charge regardless of how much you use. Because this also covers additional maintenance that might be required within the sewer area, maintaining the pipes and everything else. So that's a base charge everyone will pay, and that's tier 1. I said at the last meeting approximately 10,000 gallons was the average user in a quarter. After double checking my numbers, it's actually 13,000 gallons. So what I did was I upped the first tier to be between 0 and 15,000 gallons. So most people in the town should stay within that first tier and not have to worry about the other tiers. What that works out...
For just a second, so
Yep.
this would be average 13,000 average gallons per quarter that each household would be, an average household would use?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. That works out to $800 annually for a home. That is approximately it's $161.24 lower than the average on Cape Cod. Breaking that down even more, that works out, if the $200 in a quarter, if you divide that by 90 days, works out to $2.22 a day. is what the homeowners will be paying for their sewer, which is right around the exact cost of a cup of coffee at Dunkin' Donuts. The,
Making a correlation between the sewage and the coffee.
coffee, I'm not making a correlation at all.
Just checking.
Depends on the brand.
No correlation. As you move up the tiers, you'll see that it describes, like $15 $15 from 15 to 20,000 gallons. You pay in 1,000-gallon increments. And if you look at the small print below the scale, it lays it out. So an example would be if you use 17,000 gallons in a quarter, you would pay the base $200 charge. You would pay two $15 charges because that's 2,000 gallons over the 15, which works out to $230 would be your bill. So it would only be an increase of $30. And then,
And, excuse me for a second?
Yep.
And this was one of the reasons why you had also started to figure the figures on these numbers so that people could conserve water. So we're
Yes.
looking to conserve water. So the more water you use, the more your rate or your tier would go up.
yes,
Okay.
that's exactly it. And you'll see as you go up to tier 3, it's a $20. Tier 4, it's a $30 charge per 1,000 gallons.
And this may be of particular interest for people who have multiple, let's say for visitors, who are renting their properties or using their properties for multiple people during the summer.
Yes,
Okay,
yep. Always trying to promote the conservation of water.
right.
Sir, one
Yes.
question. This gallons, how is that measured at the water meter?
Yes, it's measured at the water
So
meter.
if you're using,
So if you have a well, if you're using town water, that's easy. If you're using a well water system, if it's your own system, you would be required to put in a meter that we can read.
but how, if somebody has an irrigation system,
So if they're on town water, you're not allowed to have an irrigation system.
oh,
Excuse me,
Unless it's
Mohan,
on
could you
well.
use your microphone,
sorry.
please?
Yep.
Ask the question again so they can capture it.
Yep, you're on.
yeah, so my question was, if somebody uses an irrigation system, you're still gonna, so they are not allowed to use an irrigation system on town water?
On town water, they're not allowed to use the irrigation system. It has to come from a well. If you are on a well and you need to add a meter, and then you also have your irrigation system come in that same well, you add the meter after the irrigation system.
Oh, okay.
And then you'd have to have an isolation valve, because one of the issues happens is when they blow out the irrigation system, they can blow the meter and spin it, good or bad, depending on, where they blow it out at. So that's in the, part of the installation inspection. We make sure that there is an isolation valve to prevent that happening. If you have multiple connections on your property, and one of them is just there because your property, you are entertaining a future addition, if there's nothing connected to it, you will not be charged the base charge. That's only if you're been tied in and connected. So I wanted to clarify that. That was a question that was brought to me. So that's the first part of this is how the customers will be billed. And like I said, I felt this was it's lower than the average, but it'll give us a good solid estimate in the future on how much money we will be bringing in. We'll be able to sit next year and say, okay, this is what we billed out, this is what we've brought in, and how will that compare to our operating budget. But right now, we're not worried about setting the budget. We're just worried about what is fair to the customers as well as, to the system, bringing in the money.
Do you want to finish your presentation and entertain questions at the end, or do you mind being interrupted? What's your
I do not mind being interrupted, and I don't mind if you guys want to, vote on these things individually, or if you want to take it like, okay, let's talk about user rates, make a vote if you choose to, or discuss changing it and then vote before we move on, or we can just do it all at once at the end. I just wonder sometimes if it's too much.
So you want to have us consider user rates, billing fees, inspection fees, and other fees?
Ultimately, yes, in the end. But I think right now, if you guys wanted to just tackle the user rates, the usage rates, I think that would be appropriate and separate it from the other ones, so we're not trying to lump everything together.
I
are there
certainly
any
would feel
comments?
comfortable.
Okay, so I'm sorry, Commissioner Toole, would you say that
That's-
again?
Yes, I feel comfortable making a motion that we accept the suggested rates as posted on the paper.
Excuse me, my fault, I'm late, and I apologize. What is the suggested household rate?
So you have a sheet in front of you
Sorry.
with a
Joe,
green.
let me show you. There you go. That's the new one.
So I'll briefly say the base charge annually would be $800, which is $161.24 lower than the Cape Cod average.
Just a second, I'm looking at the sheet of paper, I don't see 800 on here anyway.
quarter.
It's
What do
per
you say?
quarter, so it's $200 a quarter times 4 is $800 annually.
Usage rates, could you change this table that says usage rate per quarter? So it won't be any confusion?
Sure.
Now I understand.
One of the other things I think that's very
Thank you.
good to, I'm sorry, did you finish, Joe?
That's all I needed to know.
Okay. One of the other things I think that's important in the way that you have considered the rates, and this is another iteration, probably the third or fourth time that you've presented ways for us to consider rates, is that there was feedback from residents of the town of Mashpee when the initial plan was to begin looking at rates based on, as the assessor looks at rates, looking at numbers of bedrooms. So I commend you in being responsive to citizens of Mashpee to say it really makes much more sense to be charging people based on the amount of water that they, or the amount of, that they use as opposed, or the amount of usage that they have as opposed to the numbers of bedrooms. And that does answer a number of questions that were brought up much earlier.
Yes.
So thank you.
Second, I did have another question now that I think about it. What definitively is the rate of Barnstable and Falmouth and Chatham on a quarterly basis?
All right, I have to sit here and do the math. I gave you the annual. Where'd I put my phone?
It's right in front of you.
Oh, up here.
These are the numbers I asked you for last meeting.
Which towns were you concerned about?
Falmouth, Barnstable, and Chatham, all who have long experience now in the business.
Okay.
All right, Barnstable quarterly is 168.30. Falmouth is 206.05
Quarterly.
quarterly. And Chatham is 159.12, and they are subsidized. That I do know, I just don't know by how much. Mark, do you happen to know by how much? Okay.
So we're comparable to Falmouth, but a bit lower.
Bit lower than Falmouth, and a little bit higher than the other two towns, and one of the towns we know is subsidized,
Yes,
the lowest one, which is the 159.12.
understandable. Are there any comments, any other comments or questions?
Where did you get the number 200?
200, it was a round number, and it was below, I was trying to stay below the average, but I wanted to also keep it simple as we're going into billing, so customers aren't going, oh, how does this total up at in the beginning? I think as we move on in the future and people understand it better, we can start dialing into tighter numbers that could be not so round.
And I think it's also helpful that you had presented to us earlier that the average amount of water, the average amount of usage per household was 13,000, which, and so you're basing this on a little bit higher, 15,000 gallons. I'm sorry, gallons.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that number becomes reasonable.
Yes, it keeps more people into that range and not worrying about stepping into the tiers and having the bill get more expensive quicker.
Yeah, and I think we were also concerned that there weren't, I think this is one of the issues that you raised, Commissioner Toole, is that we don't have too much variation between quarters or between years. So we don't want to start very low, we don't want to start very high, we want to try to get a figure that's going to be fair, reasonable, and based on usage.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do have a question about the Cape Cod average number that you had in the beginning of $964, was that based on the quarterly costs from Barnstable, Falmouth, and Chatham?
No, it actually, from the last presentation I gave, it incorporated Barnstable, Chatham, Edgartown, Falmouth, Harwich, Nantucket, Oak Bluff, Provincetown, and Tisbury, so Cape and Islands.
All right, so I'm assuming that those other towns have higher numbers, because to come out to that $964 number, you're going to need something a little bit higher than what we see in Chatham and
Yes,
Barnstable.
Provincetown is at $1390.95 annually. Edgartown was another one that was big, which was $1,066, and then Oak Bluff followed, or excuse me, Tisbury followed that, or was actually higher than $1,210. Then Oak Bluff was $1,020. So yeah, most of them were actually over $1,000.
I just wanted to make sure we weren't looking at a tight group of numbers today which didn't add up, so that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, and I did Eastern Massachusetts as well. Incorporated some of those of the off-Cape areas, and that actually worked out to $960.46. So it is actually pretty close on and off-Cape in Eastern Massachusetts.
Is it fair to say what I'm going to say, all right? Is it fair to say that 200 represents a number that's achievable with a quality processing facility, having looked at Eastern Mass and Cape and Islands operating systems, that this 200 is a fairly average cost? In other words, it isn't pulled out of the air, it's pulled out of the fact that there are a dozen or more operating systems which you've evaluated, and this seems to be right down the pike.
Yes, that's fair to say.
Okay, we'll keep it in that comparison. Then the second subject, I don't know if you've covered it or not, but we are going to be for about 2 years in the process of bringing up the processing plant. So we're going to have people on it, and it is not actually supporting itself. And you've used the word subsidies, which I am totally against. I'm going to make a suggestion today, and I will make it in the form of a motion if necessary. What we should do is, for those people that we scale up with, is establish a discount amount. In other words, if this is a fine number, 200, and we vote on it, we accept it or we work it out. Now, I'm down the corner here with 8 other houses. We're going to sign up and start this process. You can't charge me the 200.
Yes, we absolutely can. The subsidy is, when I use the word subsidy, that's the DOR's definition and the state's definition for the enterprise fund and how we operate. We operate because the town subsidizes the enterprise fund.
So you're
it's
gonna
a very
charge-
specific word.
Number one, first unit that's put onto the system, the $200.
Yes. And we set the rates, we know we're subsidized, we're actually being subsidized 100% in the beginning. So every bit of money we bring in stays within the enterprise fund. At the end of the year, we'll determine what we have, what we've billed out, what our operating costs were actual, and actually what we receive. We then can start looking at trying to dial in numbers to cover as much of our budget as possible, and then slowly work. The intent is with the enterprise fund is to eventually get off the town subsidy and be able to operate independently like a business. But during the startup phase, especially because it's going to take time for people to tie in, trying to figure out the number of how many people are actually going to tie in. You can't predict it. So you start out with this amount of money. As we get more customers come on, we can stay with that amount of money, and then when we do our annual rate evaluation, we can say, hey, you know what, we've now got 1,200 customers on here. We can either reduce rates, or let's increase another $25 and get rid of the
You
subsidy.
can look at it
You have
then.
to look at the whole picture.
So is this the way other towns have started up? They've established a rate and then just started charging it the moment they tie up number one?
Everybody does it a little bit differently, but yes, for the most part, everybody, they set a rate, because you have to set a uniformed rate that can be determined by a method,
Okay,
and that's what we've done here.
okay.
I have a question as well. So as we begin to set the rate, I mean, we know that the first number of houses is 400, or residences is 439. And they have 90 days to hook up. So I don't understand why there'd be a question of how many would be hooking up. Isn't it the
We can
number?
set a timeline all we want. We only have so many people that can actually do the work to connect them. And they might run into situations like, yeah, we can do it in 6 months. So we're
That's
trying
what
to,
the
we are
hesitation
making
is.
steps to try to avoid that. Like, a lot of neighborhoods, they've actually, I gave some advice and people have actually pursued this, which is, trying to get it with a company and asking them, hey, how about if me and my whole street, we all sign on with you, give us an estimate? That can increase how quickly it gets put in the ground, because then the company can only mobilize once, knock out 10 houses, and then go somewhere else. But if they do it onesies, twosies, it could take a really long time.
That was also a question that came from a resident on Shipwreck as well.
Yep.
Knowing when to get ready for that, because he was trying to get the people on his street to come together.
And we've also taken,
We've made contingencies for those things.
yeah, and we've made other contingencies to try to ease that, which is a lot of places might require an engineer drawing in order to make the connection. We've established that if they have a septic plan, engineer septic plan filed with the Board of Health, and they have a tie card, the installer can do the connection and fill out a tie card showing the connection, as opposed to having an engineer draw it out. If we don't have the septic plan, then we're going to require an engineer, which then could take more time for those customers. I heard in one case, they were told 6 months to get the engineer drawings back.
Well, this is very helpful for us to then begin to understand some of the variability, where the variability and the issues are going to be coming from as people begin to hook up. Are there any other comments or questions?
I have one question.
Yes, please. No rush.
That subsidy, Jared, you were mentioning, is that from the state or
It's from the town.
from the town?
The town will approve our operating budget, and
For how many years?
as much as we need, we try to reduce that as quickly as we can, though, because people get antsy after a while.
But you don't have a definitive figure
We don't have a
for the
definitive
length of
answer. It's
time.
going to be one of those, as we evaluate the information, we get customers on, how quickly it happens, we'll have to constantly evaluate those numbers and say, okay, this is where we're at. Let's take the 100%, can we drop it down to 50%? And then drop it down to 25, and so on.
So is our goal to wean ourselves off of the subsidy as soon as
As
possible?
soon as we can,
Right.
yes.
Does the town have a quote-unquote date for each quarter that's automatic because of other billing process?
We don't have a policy that outlines it. We're starting with July 1st with the fiscal year, and every 3 months from July 1st, July, October.
Well, you just defined it.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not in a policy, but that's how I've done it everywhere I've been at, so.
Yeah.
Could
does
you
it-
clarify that again? I mean, what does this July 1 mean?
So actually, June
It's an
30th,
arbitrary date.
it's when you start the fiscal year, so that's when we would start our first
Oh.
billing cycle.
Okay.
So
It is predefined with the fiscal year, is
we
what you're
use
saying.
we use it as a
Unless
benchmark.
something comes up and then you change it, right?
Yep.
Good.
Well done.
So
So
you guys have a
maybe-
motion on the table.
We
You
have it,
call the question?
please, I'd like to call the question.
Did anybody make a motion?
Yeah, we need to have.
I did.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes. And did someone second it?
I believe you
second it.
seconded, yeah.
Okay. So could you restate your motion, please?
Yes. I move that we accept the rates as presented by the sewer commissioner.
Okay, Commissioner Toole has just made a motion at 2:25 in the afternoon to accept the rates as presented by wastewater superintendent Meter. All of those in favor, and we'll take an individual voice vote. Aye.
I think you should say the amount and the timing or whatever, because.
I'm sorry, the amount was to look at a rate of $200 per quarter or $800 per year
For the average
for the
resident.
average resident, for the average, we don't
Site.
actually call them residences, it's property, for the average property at approximately.
Average residential property.
Average residential property at approximately 13,000 gallons.
No, I think it's going to go up to and include 15,000.
15,000.
Yes,
Up to
15,000.
15.
Up to 15,000.
for the base one. Yeah.
Thank you for the corrections. So all of those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye, as well.
No, they are.
So we have now accepted the proposal as stands for a rate of $200 per quarter per average household, or $800 per year for the first year.
You're right. So with that way it was presented, that motion, because we added the extra language. It's, just for clarity, it seems like we've excluded tiers 2, 3, and 4, and we've only voted on tier 1.
Well, we said the base rate. That
This is
doesn't
the base
mean,
rate for 200, oh, okay, I see what
So
you're
you see what
saying.
I'm saying? Yep.
Yes, so per tier, so it's $200
just the base rate. Leave it at
is
that.
the base rate.
There are additional rates and charges that are not included in this motion. And you
Correct,
will
that's
have
why-
to
that's why I was just
refine
asking.
those as you go, even though you'll start with this, but
That's, I just want to make sure that was clear.
And we're also clarifying that we're using a tiered system as presented. So does that cover it?
Do you need to vote on that charge for each tier?
Yeah, so I think you excluded in that motion what the rates are going to be for each tier. So if we're going to do it that way, I would recommend that you would say in tier 2, if you choose to, make a motion to recommend the $15 per 1,000 gallons in tier 2, then a motion, or you can say as written in the tier structure presented today.
So what we're looking for is a motion that will now take into account not only tier 1 or the base rate, but to also then look at tiers 2, 3, and 4.
after tier 1, just say comma, tier 2, $15 for the next additional 20,000 gallons. And tier 3, $20 for the next additional 40,000 gallons. And tier 4, $30 for, is nothing in here.
It's $40. 40, it is 40.
The rate is 30
And
Oh,
it
I
has to
see.
be clarified per 1,000 gallons, not just for the, it's
Per
per
gallon.
1,000 gallons within that tier 2. So it's 15 to 20, it works out to $75 for the whole tier, if you were to actually use the whole tier's worth of money.
Would you clarify that again so that we can
So-
restate the motion, please?
Yes, so in tier 2, it'd be $15 per 1,000 gallons within tier 2, which ranges from
Well,
15,000
you
to
don't have to put the
20,000.
range in, you got that on this. Just go boom, boom, boom.
Why can't we just say as written,
Yeah.
please? Let's keep it simple.
Yes, because I think it's clear that you've made you've presented us with a tier system in that there's the base rate and then there are 4 different tiers that range from, 0 to 15 to 20 to 40 across the board.
Or you could just say the rate structure with the normal residential hookup being $800.
And following the tier system as
Following the- yeah.
illustrated. All right, would someone like to make that motion?
I still think you've isolated out one particular tier,
But
and
you-
that's going to be a
You
problem.
isolated out the first tier, which is the most popular tier, and probably, 80% of the people will be in.
Yeah,
Or you could say that we're recommending the rate structure using the tiered system with the average, but see, now you're getting in the weeds.
Just copy that,
Yeah,
period.
Yeah.
it's a great idea.
Just call it base
I
rate.
think that's where we started.
Why did you feel that we needed to clarify and go across the tiers?
Because when Joe wanted it clarified, he clarified specifically tier 1, the base charge for the
Only
average user, and
illustrated one.
excluded in that motion all the other tiers.
Okay, so now we're
That's why we
looking,
want to have all the other tiers included.
okay, so now we're looking for a motion to include all the other tiers as written in the proposal.
what, do we
I'd
have
like
to
to make a
withdraw the other
motion.
motion?
No, because we did vote on tier 1. Now we're
Okay.
moving forward with looking at the additional tiers up to tier 4.
I'd like to make a motion
Please do.
that we have reviewed and accepted the usage rates illustrated today with the enclosed, what do you call it, graphic? That
Table?
is a graphic table per quarter for initial hookup and second, third, and fourth, what do you
Tiers.
call it, tiers, period, end of story. Just copy the article. Send her the file so she doesn't have to do anything.
Do you accept that?
Yep.
As a motion? Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Second, the motion is seconded. So at 2, 31, we now have a motion that's been proposed and accepted. May I have a vote, please? And we'll go by Commissioner.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Thank you, excellent. It's Catherine. We have a member on Zoom. So as we move forward, we've now then accepted the usage rates per tier as illustrated in the graphic that was presented.
So I'm gonna just read through all the tiers, lay them out. I think this will be the easiest. We can discuss any one as I'm going through it. You can stop me, we can discuss it. I can make the annotation on my sheet if we decide to change anything, and then maybe just take the vote to accept the fees and charges as listed on the paper or as amended. I think it would be just to prepare everybody for the next possible motion.
Jared, can I just ask, behind these, are these what normal and customary in other towns?
And I
Is
can
that
give
where they
examples
came
of
from?
areas that I've used it at and seen it at. As I'm going down, I can clarify them. If it's one you want clarified, please let me know. The first one on there, for full disclosure to customers, is the credit card fee. In municipalities, we are allowed to charge the credit card fee to the customer. We don't have to absorb it as a business. So whatever that fee is for their credit card would be added to any credit card fee. That's just so customers know if they choose to pay by credit card, that fee will be tacked on. Delinquency fees, there's a $25 late fee. That would also encompass the town's collector that we have, that I've learned about, that, if we have to use them, that fee will come out of this $25 charge as well as any other fees, and a $25 return check fee per check. Inspection fees, the building department, specifically the plumbing inspector, is going to be doing most of our inspections. So whatever their fee is what will be charged them. So we're going to let them pull that permit through them. If I ever have to go out there for anything specific, it's rolled in my opinion, the initial $200 that we're charging customers. I'm not going to charge them independently for my time. Annual inspection for commercials. So this is a fee that it's becoming more and more popular, or not popular, but used because during COVID, we had situations where businesses were allowed to put like tables outside and chairs outside, and they added to their count. And a lot of people were just adding those and leaving their inside count there. So then they were using more flow than what they were technically permitted for. So it's a fee that allows us to go check things like if our laundromat adds more wash machines. So we annually go check and do counts for that stuff, mainly for flow accountability. If that is required, then it would be a $100 fee we'd add to that business. That's in that section. Other fees and charges. The application fee, this is a standard cost of $200. I know when the water department went online, there was a substantial connection fee. We're just charging for the permit. We don't do any of the actual taps, so therefore I don't feel it's appropriate for us to charge a connection fee. So that fee would be for any change of use, and a change of use can be consisted of adding flow because you added a bedroom to your house or because you added chairs to your restaurant. That would be a change of use. The annual biological chemical auction to demand. So the BOD charge is based off strength of wastewater. When you deal with restaurants, when you deal with ice cream parlors, things like that, a lot of grease, it costs more for us to clean up. So that charge is an annual inspection that we would do when you have a restaurant or a business that provides food, like a little mini mart or shopette, for us to inspect their grease trap. We include that inspection, and we also include their commercial inspection into that. We don't nickel and dime them.
Excuse me, it's
Yes.
$1,500 for an inspection?
It's an annual fee because it's a grease trap inspection. It encompasses a lot.
Well, it's an annual fee including inspection. It's
Yes.
not an inspection fee.
It is.
It's an annual fee for processing. That's the problem. And it includes the inspection to confirm what is going down the pipe.
Thank you for your clarification, sir.
Okay.
The next one is a sewer cleanout fee. So this one is I have little asterisks next to it to kind of lay it out more. So there will be times, and it will happen, that we'll get called, let's say, to one of the condos where they have multiple units going into a chamber. It's about ready to overflow. things are plugged up. We could tell the homeowner, go ahead and call a hauler to suck this out of here before it gets too bad. We can call them on their behalf to have them come do it. We ran into a situation in one of the places I was at where the person refused to pay the hauler's bill. And then the hauler kept coming to us going, hey, you called us, we want you to pay the bill, or I'm never showing up to you guys again for an emergency. And it was crazy. So we ultimately ended up paying the bill and then charging it to the customer's sewer bill, because our method of collection is a little bit easier. And then we charged a processing fee for that. If they pay their bill on time, they don't get the $200 processing fee. It's just if we have to facilitate this for happening. It's usually only used in emergency situations, and it's not something that's regularly charged.
I have a question about that.
Yep.
What about people, I mean, I know in one of in the rules and regulations, there are some stipulations about what should and should not go down the sewer or what should not go down the drains. Is there a penalty for people that violate those rules then?
So
if they're
that would be
putting things that don't belong in the sewer?
Yep, so there's a mechanism in the Mass General laws that gives me the authority to write fines. And
Okay, but that's not listed in here.
It's not listed because it's a statutory right, so I didn't spell it outside of here, but I'm allowed to levy up to $5,000 a day in a fine. Statutorily.
For essentially violating the system.
For violating any of those rules, yes.
Okay.
We have locked up in that 62-page summary of what we accepted as our processing for the whole sewer system. Doesn't that have the documentation in it for going after people that are putting the wrong things down the sewers? I'm pretty sure it was in there.
There is in our policies, there is an outline of what can and can't go down the sewer, as far as the fining portion of it goes, and it does reference that they can be levied a fine. What gives me the authority to levy the fine is in Mass General Law, Chapter 83.
Okay, but we don't say what the penalties are in
No,
that
because it's,
policy?
you could sit there and, if you
No, I'm
start,
just-
if you start spelling it out, some people are like, well, it's not on the list, therefore you can't
Yeah.
fine me for it. If you violate the general policies, we can lay the fine, they can always appeal the fine.
Yeah.
But it allows me to do up to $5,000 a day. If I was to ever levy a fine, before it would go into active, I'd bring it before the sewer commissioners.
All I was doing was checking and
Yep.
looking to see if Chatham had made a mistake when they wrote their rules, and we don't want to incorporate it as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
The other two are, so service disconnect fee and service resumption fee for delinquency of bills. So it's basically shutting off or continuing the service. I've never actually had to use it, but it's been something we've implemented. And that is if we ever had to just, shut somebody off. Usually there's other methods of collection of the bills that it gets rectified well before this happens. This is just a last resort option that we have available to us, but I think it's important that we spell it out because if we ever do get there, it would need to be spelled out. So those are the fees. Is there any specific one anybody would like to discuss or maybe change or move around?
I just have a question again
Yep.
for kind of big picture.
Yep.
So you've also spoken about the process of people applying to hook into the sewer system. Now you'll have the ability to have those packages put together so that when people are ready to hook into the system, they now will have an application fee that they would be filing. They'll know what the charges will be, what it will cost them if they're using a credit card versus a check, and what happens if they put the wrong things down the system. So we're now going to the next step where we can attach the fees to the process, and then you'll come back with that process, which will be both online and available through the town, right?
Yes, so like if this was approved, when any changes I'll finalize, it'll be loaded to the webpage immediately. So people can start looking at this from home. And that's what we'll do every time if it ever changes in the future, we'll repost the most current. It'll allow us to start building the Munis billing system so we can actually start preparing to do the billing. And yes, it'll allow us to start putting those applications, finalizing them, and the tie-in packets that will be going out to the customers, and I'll have all this information laid out there for them. This is one of those many things that we had to finalize before I can send out those documents.
I understand. Yes, Commissioner Lyons.
In the subject that you just brought up, the finalization of that package, obviously the question of who's going to pump out my tank when it's closed out. is it called out so it's obvious in the closing out of your existing septic system, existing Title V septic system, that the pumping of the tank and the closing of it is all burdened by the homeowner?
So it is so the installers are aware of it, and it's the Board of Health's
I
installer
didn't
list.
ask if the installers were.
Correct,
I
but
asked
that's-
if the homeowner is going to be aware that that cost is also included in the contract to close him out, that pumping is included in that.
Yes, it's written in the packet that it's called the abandonment of the Title V.
Yeah.
To abandon, it's the
Yeah.
steps to abandon Title V, who you need to call for inspections, what you need to do, so it is laid out in there.
It
It's one of
says
the
that,
steps that need to be done.
yeah, the pumping has to be done. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. And it's the owner's expense.
It's the owner's expense, but it's the license or the utility installer's responsibility, and they're the ones that are actually gonna be held to that standard.
Right.
It's part of their agreement to be a utility installer with the town.
And my understanding also from the package that you're starting to put together is that there'll be a whole list of things that people need to do for the abandonment, for the putting, hooking up, and everything will be coming, it'll be
Yes.
done in steps, and homeowners would be aware of it.
Yep, and it'll have all the contact phone numbers, what inspector you call when do you
But
put.
again, the
Yeah,
homeowner
it'll all be
will
laid
know
out,
what
step
they're
by
supposed
step,
to do.
to keep it easy.
Exactly. Well, I don't know how
Well,
easy, but at
Less
least,
stress on knowing what to
but at
do.
least homeowners will know what's
Yes.
expected of them when they hook up to the system and when they have to abandon the old system and then move forward.
Yes,
And then what the penalties are if they abuse it.
yes.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Well, then I will entertain a motion, please.
I'll try another motion here.
Okay.
I move that we accept the suggested billing fees, inspection fees, and other fees and charges as presented by our wastewater superintendent.
And a second, please.
I'll second that.
Thank you. And the motion, so the motion was made at 2:45 to accept the billing fees, inspection fees, and other fees and charges, and the motion was seconded. All of those in favor?
Aye.
Uh,
And it was unanimous. We had a commissioner who was also on Zoom, but I think she's disappeared.
She
That's okay.
zoomed.
She zoomed. Okay, thank you. The motion was then passed and accepted at 2:45 on the billing fees, inspection fees, and other fees and charges
That were presented
that were
today.
presented today by the wastewater superintendent.
Date your documents whenever you give them out, because it's the only way you'll ever
Once it's approved,
figure
I'll
out
date
what you did 2 years from now.
It'll say in the bottom, it'll say approved on the document, what the date it was approved.
Right. And the executive assistant from the wastewater department has asked that we have a notation of the time that our motions get formed and accepted. It makes it easier for her to record the minutes. Are there any other issues that you would like to have us consider for the wastewater rates, fees, charges?
Not at this time. I think we can close the hearing.
I do have one suggestion. If we're noting the time at which we take votes, is it possible when we upload things to the internet that we have sort of a timestamp that's visible if somebody just wants to go and fast forward to the vote? That would be possible because you're so precise with the time.
This
that
is
you're
the
listing.
reason why Ms. Leslie had asked that we do put in the time that we're doing things, because she is actually taking the minutes from looking at the recordings, and it makes it easier for her, just as you're saying, to go to the timestamp within the video of what time the votes were taken, so that would fit for regular
She
citizens
can
as well.
find them.
Yeah, it's easy for her to find them, so it would be not only easy for her, it's anyone who's reviewing the videos when they look at them on Mashpee TV
All right,
or on
thank you.
YouTube. Thank you for raising the question. I will now then declare that our public hearing in addressing the Mashpee sewer user rates and fees has now been closed. And we will just move on to the remainder of our normal sewer commission agenda. And are there any public comments from those in the audience? And we welcome Select Person Colombo for visiting. Okay, no other, and a representative from GHD and a public person. No questions, no comments? Okay, then we'll move, there's no old business that we need to consider. And the new business that we'd like to consider is a presentation from the Water Quality Coordinator and Grant Person, I forgot the other term that you used, about just a brief presentation about a Freshwater Ponds Committee status update.
Okay, well, I handed you all out just a scope of what I see the mission statement being for our proposed Freshwater Ponds Committee. This handout includes our mission statement that I had drafted, and I don't know if I should read that to the record, as well as the structure I see fit, and this is based on the Falmouth pond groups as well as other pond groups throughout the country.
Would you, if you don't mind?
Yeah. So the proposed mission statement reads, the Mashpee Freshwater Ponds Committee is committed to supporting the Select Board and Town Manager in their efforts to safeguard Mashpee's freshwater ponds as invaluable natural resources. Our mission is to protect and preserve these delicate ecosystems by promoting clean and healthy water, conserving their rich biodiversity, and advocating for sustainable use practices that respect the balance of nature. By fostering responsible stewardship, we aim to ensure that these ponds remain thriving habitats for wildlife, enduring sources of beauty, and vital community resources for recreation and education. This work is dedicated to preserving these treasures not only for today's residents, but for generations to come, emphasizing the critical importance of ecological integrity and long-term sustainability.
Thank you. There's also just, I'm just going to add an iteration to this, in that the proposal for when it was first discussed was to not create a new committee, but instead to use the existing committee on the Mashpee Wakeby Management Committee would then become folded over into or become the proposed Mashpee Freshwater Ponds Committee, to broaden it to then consider the other ponds, not just Mashpee Wakeby. I assume that that would also mean that any of the smaller kettle ponds would also be considered, if in fact they need to be considered in some way, shape, or form with this committee?
Yes, and part of the committee structure would be a representative from each of our great ponds, so that would be the ponds that are above a certain acreage within town, that are more recreationally used by the residents. We do have other great ponds in our town that I would like the members at large to be focused on. This is just a proposal. I'm not dictating the committee by any means, but the committee would consist of 8 core members and 2 members at large. I specified what those members would be doing as part of the Freshwater Ponds Committee. Just to make sure we have a good group of people who are working with town staff and residents to protect these resources. I can just go through what my recommendation is and what will be presented to the select board. And like you said, the formation of one whole ponds group is much, much better than just having one ponds committee for Mashpee Wakeby. Because, freshwater ecosystems, they're different and unique individually, but together, more powerful for us to get funding if we go together as a ponds group rather than one group focusing on one pond.
That's excellent to hear. That's something we hadn't thought about.
Right.
Excellent, yeah.
So the proposal is to have just a resident or a technical expert that would sit on the committee. That member would have some expertise in water chemistry, hydrology, limnology, or pond management. That individual would collaborate directly with the town's water quality coordinator, myself, and act as the committee chair if voted. We'd like to have that person as the chair, but that's not required. It's also, a vote that will occur internally. I would like to have 2 of the local government regulatory representatives, myself, and then future water quality testing people that work for the town, and either the town planner or the conservation agent, however the select board sees fit. I'm tending to lean towards the conservation agent just because of the permitting requirements, and their jurisdictional area does encompass the ponds. 4 community representatives that will represent the major ponds here in town, so John's Pond, Mashpee Wakeby Pond, Ashumet Pond, and Santuit Pond. And the 2 members at large that have general interest in conservation and management of Mashpee's ponds. So the primary responsibilities that I see for this group, and what I'm doing is mimicking the freshwater ponds group in Falmouth that started up, that is quite successful right now in their endeavors. Conservation and protection, so water quality monitoring, invasive species management, and habitat preservation. They'll be tasked with education and outreach, community workshops, volunteer programs, and just awareness campaigns. Keep in mind, the committees can't, side politically on any town meeting vote, but, support and educate more than campaigning. Regulation compliance, again, they can't, enforce regulations, but to work with town staff to, identify areas of improvement and work with them to bolster our regulations here in town to protect our water resources. Participate in data and research collection. So I envision these individuals helping in volunteer programs, collecting water sampling, similar to what the Mashpee Environmental Coalition did for years on our ponds. And recreation management of our ponds. That's becoming an increasing topic of concern just because of what is allowed on these spanning great ponds we do have here in town. So the short-term goals of this committee would to come up with a comprehensive pond management plan for the entirety of our ponds. Launch a volunteer program for monitoring, which is going to be important and invaluable to future management actions. Community engagement, just public awareness. The hope would be to create something similar to the Orleans, I believe, Pond Blue Book, and release that to the general public just to spread education and how an individual or a resident can protect the water resources around them. And open space and recreation, so work with the Environmental Coalition, Select Board, Planning Board, and conservation agents to seek parcels that are worth protecting and just work with those entities to protect those lands. So that's the general framework that I'll be recommending to the Select Board in the creation of a new, altered freshwater ponds group.
Commissioner Lyons?
Thanks.
Very good, and probably long overdue. I just have one suggestion. Can we make sure that a portion of the town website is set aside entitled the proper name, freshwater resurrection, or whatever we want to call it?
Yeah.
All right? That it should have and it should have this in it. And there should be an assignment of one of the select persons, perhaps under the last point that you made here, that you should have a couple of, what do you call them, at large?
The members at large. So every committee has a select board liaison.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily have to be part of the committee or appointed to the committee. So during
But
the
we should
yeah.
work to get one of the select persons involved.
Yeah, they'll be appointed during the formation of the group by the select board. The select board will make a recommendation for the liaison to work with the group.
I have a couple of questions for you. How would you see a group, a volunteer group like APCC working with you? That's my first question. And then I have another question about coordinating with the community preservation group that would also be dealing with open space and funding for that. How do you see those liaising?
So for APCC, they're always looking for volunteers and coordinating for some of their sampling efforts. A pond watch group that would be looking for signs of impaired waterways or health risk, cyanobacteria blooms. Even if it's just as small as a report of a number of geese in a certain area, hey, you might want to take a look at this for fecal coliform levels. But more of a pond watch group, and I see them working with APCC in just notifying them that, hey, maybe you guys need to check this area, I'm seeing this here, and work with APCC and the other groups for education of what to look for in our ponds, invasive species, and just how you can better your shorefront buffer. There's a number of areas where I think the ponds group will fit in with working with some of those nonprofits.
That's excellent. This is so exciting because it's a very good way of looking at things so comprehensively, because we've known over the years the amount of effort that's gone into Santuit Pond and into Washumit Pond, both the evaluation of them and the testing of them, and then now you have a group that would come together and be able to share management strategies as well. So you've done an extraordinary job in putting this together.
Yeah, I mean, every single one of our ponds is going through some effort of remediation. Washumit Pond, we're working closely with the Joint Base Cape Cod right now for an additional nutrient and activation treatment. We just completed the Mashpee Wakeby diagnostic assessment with some recommendations that are going to need to follow through in the very near future. And Santuit Pond that has 3+ grants associated with it right now for stormwater management and internal nutrient and activation and restoration projects. So there's a whole slew of things that's happening in our great ponds, but there are those few ponds that we want to look at too. Some of the ponds we haven't even collected data on, and that's important that we just start gathering that information, especially with PFAS and other contaminants of concern.
Excellent. Thank you. Commissioner
Yeah, I
Sprout?
wanted to go back briefly to the mission statement, which most of the time, they have to be written very broadly, and I understand that. So I'm looking at ecosystem by promoting clean and healthy water, wonderful, conserving their rich biodiversity. I'm assuming that's various species that are inhabiting the water, wonderful, and advocating for sustainable use practices that respect the balance of nature. I'm concerned that that's a very broad definition, and I want to make sure that the data is out there to balance things. I know out west, they have restricted use of water because of a salamander. I mean, they can get crazy. I don't want to see that happening here. And how are we going to make sure that that balance is really kept?
I mean, it's a give and take. So we're not going to, I wouldn't suggest an extreme, but there is a give and take when it comes to these ponds. I mean, Santuit Pond, for example, there was the horsepower restriction. There were some people who weren't fans of that, but the pond could not handle a large outboard motor of 50+ horse power. It just can't, stirring up the entire bottom. But for a case like that, it all depends on whether that species is protected or endangered. So there could be extremes like that if the town so chooses. It's all up for town meeting vote, dictated by the residents.
That's excellent to know. And the other thing is that you're also saying in the proposal that it's data-driven. So there seems to be some safeguards built in so that it's data-driven. You have a large representative of numbers of people who could be watchdogs for seeing that the quality of the pond and the balance of nature is met, as well as the use for recreation and keeping the pond safe for perpetuity. Because we're all going down the wrong direction right now,
Right.
or all the ponds are. I'm not saying we are, but the ponds are all headed in a not great direction right now.
Right,
This
and
is
you
a
had
great
asked about the
proposal.
CPC, so I'm sorry, I forgot
Yeah,
to
I'm sorry.
mention that there are projects that would fit for funding through CPC. They'll all fit into CPC funds that we could use. As far as restoring recreation and access, that's directly in line, as well as the property acquisition that we can work with the EOC and conservation with. So if there's recommendations from the ponds group, we would definitely be working very closely with CPC for looking for funding for these projects.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
So what would you need from us? Primarily a recommendation to take it forward? A recommendation from the sewer commission to take it forward to the select board?
Yeah, I think that the sewer commission can, recommend the approval, and you see what the select board thinks and start with the advertisement for filling some of these slots.
Well, first we have to create the committee.
Create the commission.
Create
I'm
the
like, let's
committee.
get going.
I would say maybe a memo to the town
We
manager's
just
office.
recommend that
He's already
the
reviewed
board
this,
that they accept.
but maybe just give him a
Proposal.
formal memo, and
Yeah.
then he can decide when it'd be most appropriate to bring it up to the select board, if or when.
Okay.
Say that again, Jared, you
I
weren't
would,
using
I
your
would
microphone,
recommend
please.
that a memo be submitted from this board to the town manager's office, and then when it appropriately fits the schedule of the select board, he'll get it presented. I know he's already seen the document and reviewed it that you have before you, so it was very well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Extraordinary. Are there any comments from the commissioners, and would you agree that we don't vote on this necessarily, but that we do recommend that we forward a letter of support from the sewer commission to the town manager's office? Any comments, questions about that? Are you all
I
agreed?
think we forward it to the select board.
Okay. Well, we could send it to both of them, the select board as well as the town manager.
What the select board does with it
Okay,
will be their responsibility, not
okay.
I think there should be a recommendation to reform the Mashpee Wakeby Ponds Group to a freshwater ponds committee.
Well, let's
Yeah.
put it in the form of a motion then.
Okay.
I would think that that's more in the coming of processing of it. We're just recommending you move forward with
Okay.
this.
Yeah, I think that would be better.
You
We'll
gotta
just
come up with the
recommend,
details as you go down the staircase. you know.
Yes, okay.
Just don't go down head first.
so we will
Try
make the
not to.
recommendation that you follow through and move forward with the creation of the new committee, not establishing a new committee, but encompassing the Mashpee Wakeby Management Committee now to encompass all of the great ponds of the town.
Great.
Well done. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.
A unified effort. let's
A
say.
unified effort instead of fragmented and having difficult times in trying to get it all through. The next order of business is the chair's report, and I will just keep it brief. I just want to remind everybody that there's a video that you should all be aware of in looking at the select board meeting from Monday, the 16th, about the diagnostic study of the Mashpee Wakeby Pond. And also the other report that came out that would be very valuable for people to look at is the APCC new State of the Waters report that has just come out. In fact, it was written up in the Mashpee Enterprise this last week. So that's all that I have on the agenda. We have no other new business. Did you have anything else with Mr. Meter? Commissioner Lyons?
Yes.
Okay.
For some time, it's been informal, but I think everybody in the room should recognize now that we have neglected one large area of pollution in town in favor of moving north and taking care of residences first. The upper part of Great Neck North Road, all the way from, let's say, where the crosswalk is, down to Greenwood, has approximately 1,000 homes and condominiums in it that are polluting directly into the river. There's nothing to stop it, and we avoided sewering in there for some reason that should not be continued. We have asked our engineers to come up with a basic schedule of what would have to be done to get those 1,000 as maybe phase 3 or phase 4 in the processing plant. And I'd like to see it on on our sewer commission meeting list as business, new business. And I'd like to call Sandy, I can't tell, Sandy, who's here from?
Mark is here.
Mark?
Yes.
What's been done, anything?
It is in consideration as
Please come to the microphone. Thank you. This is Mark Drainville from GHD.
Yeah, Joe, this is part of planning process that we're in the middle of right now, so it
Yeah.
is something we'll be able to report on soon.
Can we
and
have a report
discussions.
next month on the approximate number of units and time necessary to do this? To come up with a plan so that we can look at it, make a recommendation to the town that it's included in the next phase of our facility?
So you would like number of units, and I forgot the other thing you just mentioned. Number of
Well,
units.
a description from an engineering point of view, what you'd have to do. I mean, there's about 8 roads on it, including the main road being,
So what you're requesting is that we ask our engineer consultants to give us a plan of how to address the upper part of Great Neck Road South.
yeah, it's approximately 1 mile from the Rotary down to Greenwood. There is no other concentration as seriously close to the river as that's going to continue to pollute the river with all of the good work that we're doing in Phase 1 and Phase 2 now. So I'd like to see us move on that and get prepared to create a cost analysis so that we can make it as a new phase.
Okay, yeah. So we will, it's, like I said, we have a plan that has the whole town in it.
Yeah, but we
extract
ignored
that
this
piece.
portion, which was in Phase 1 to begin with, and we skipped over it. And I'll leave that as to, the reason was a political one. And now it's time we face the music and continue the cleanup on the river so that we can then concentrate on the west side of town after getting all of our stations operating in the facility.
Okay, so we can report on that.
Thank you.
Okay,
So
having no,
that's new business.
that's
on
new
it.
business for next time. Yes, exactly. So I have no other items on our agenda to cover. I did hand out to the commissioners the second draft of the annual report. If you'll just give me that back with any comments that you have, because it will need to go to the town manager's office before February. So, having no other business, I will entertain a motion.
I so move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And thank you all. And have a wonderful holiday, however you celebrate the holiday. I wish you safe travel if you're traveling, and have just a wonderful time until we see you next in January.